I'm always a little nervous when I speak at the Bhakti Center because so many esteemed Vaishnavas that are partaking in the discussion that have partaken. So I'll try to share something and keep it focused on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So thank you for having me here. Start with some invocation prayers. Actually, let's actually look at the verses and then we'll go into those prayers as well. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashitya Deshitarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Vancha Kalpa Trubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnav Evyo Namo Namaha. So once again, I'm honored and grateful to be here at the Bhakti Center virtually. And we are reading from the 10th canto. We're going to see my screen. And we're reading from the 12th chapter and verses 29 through 31. Particularly, we're looking at the killing of Aghasura, this chapter, pastime. I'll skip to the translation. Translation: When Krishna entered the mouth of Aghasura, demigods hidden behind the clouds exclaimed, "Alas, alas!" But the friends of Aghasura, like Kamsa and other demons, were jubilant. When Krishna entered the mouth of Aghasura, the demigods hidden behind the clouds exclaimed, "Alas, alas!" But the friends of Aghasura, like Kamsa and other demons, were jubilant. Verse 30. Translation: When the invincible Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna heard the demigods crying, "Alas, alas!" from behind the clouds, he immediately enlarged himself within the demon's throat, just to save himself and the coward boys, his own associates, from the demon who wished to smash them. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Such are the acts of Krishna. Ritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkitam. Bhagavad Gita 4.8. By enlarging himself within the throat of the demon, Krishna suffocated and killed him, and at the same time saved himself and his associates from imminent death, and also saved the demigods from lamentation. Verse 31. Then, because Krishna had increased the size of his body, the demon extended his own body to a very large size. Nonetheless, his breathing stopped. He suffocated. His eyes rolled here and there and popped out. The demon's life air, however, could not pass through any outlet, and therefore it finally burst through a hole in the top of the demon's head. Jai. Aghasura is dead now. This is a part of the pastime that we are in. So we can see in this story, right now, Krishna, he goes into the mouth of Aghasura. He expands himself. The demigods are worried. Kamsa and the friends are jubilant, friends of Aghasura. And then Krishna enlarges himself. Aghasura also enlarges himself. But then Krishna, there's no one bigger than Krishna, right? And so he's able to suffocate Aghasura from inside, and then resulting in him being suffocated and dying, and thus saving the coward boys, saving himself, and saving the inhabitants of Vraj. So I'll speak a little bit about Aghasura. I know that we're in this chapter, so I'm sure many speakers we've been talking about this pastime for some time. And I'll just share some reflections in terms of what we can learn from this pastime. And then I'll open it up to also the group for questions, comments, thoughts as well. Aghasura is, as we know, he's the form of a python or a snake, 8 miles long. And also he's the brother of Bakasura, the crane demon, and also of Putana. as well. And Bhakasura represents duplicity, deceptiveness, false behavior, and Putana represents the pseudo-guru, the false guru. And each of these demons in Vrindavan was interesting. As we know, they represent different anarthas, or unwanted conditioning within our own mind and heart, that we need to work through to progress on the path of spiritual development. It's very important that we note this. We get to understand what these anarthas are within us. We can see the stories, but we have to apply them to our own life to grow. Just hearing the stories in themselves are purifying. And then we have to see where the anarthas are and then work on them. What does Aghasura represent when it comes to anarthas? He represents the anartha, or the unwanted conditioning, of cruelty and violence. Cruelty and violence. Cruelty and violence can be looked at. I was thinking that these are all related to each other. We look at Putana, the pseudo-guru, dishonesty. We look at Bhakasura, or represents duplicity, deceptiveness, and cruelty and violence. They're all in the same family. They all feed off each other, these energies. They're brothers, if you will. Now, I was thinking of violence. When we think of cruelty and violence in Aghasura, and Krishna's killing this demon, how does this apply to our life? And I was thinking that there's broadly 3 types of violence, and this is covered in the threefold miseries. So we have cruelty and violence that we inflict on ourselves. And that's, you can say that would be adhyatmic, right? From our own mind and body. And this is the way we talk to ourselves sometimes. Sometimes we can be very hard on ourselves. We can be very mean to our own selves, cruel to ourselves, and violent to ourselves, to even our body sometimes, and to our mind. Then there's violence and cruelty inflicted on others, or from others. And this would be adhibhotik, right? So when we hurt others, when we're cruel and violent to others, and others are to us, we're exchanging this energy of violence. And then there's adhidevik, which is violence or cruelty toward Mother Nature, and then the result is actually Mother Nature is cruel toward us, to our environment. We see so many different things in this world now, and different issues with the weather and the climate, and much of it is because of how we're treating this planet, actually. Right? How we're treating this planet and how we're behaving, it's coming back, the corrosion of that is coming back to us in the form of violence. So we have 3 types of violence. Violence that we inflict on ourselves through our self-talk, our treatment of others and how they treat us, and then our actions toward Mother Nature, and then the resultant actions back. So we have all these 3 types of cruelty and violence that occurs. And it creates misery. One of the points I also wanted to make today is that these 3 miseries are there, but it actually starts with us, this first one, adhyatmic. Because the way we talk to ourselves, our internal state, is actually what we become. How we treat ourselves is how we end up treating others, and how we treat the environment around us. So we have to start with that. And when we look at, I was reading that in Chaitanya Shikshamrita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentions that where does this anartha come from? Cruelty and violence. Where we unnecessarily give trouble to ourselves, to others, to Mother Nature, Bhumi Mata. He says that it's born out of a hatred, or malice, or envy. These 3 things. Hatred, malice, or envy. It's called jiva himsa, which is envy, or matsarya. We know this is one of the anarthas, envy. So these are the causes of actually being cruel, this Aghasura demon-like anartha that we all have to maybe some extent or another. But if we peel that back underneath hatred, malice, and envy, there's a sense of, I've noticed that when we're cruel or violent, there's an internal sense of insecurity that we have. An internal sense of insecurity or fear. It's actually fear. Fear is the greatest common denominator when it comes to all these behaviors. And this fear creates a disconnection with ourselves and our own spiritual nature and our own higher nature and who we are, and disconnection with our relationship with Krishna also. And then we get disconnected from each other. right? It's really fear. There's a sense of fear that we develop, and through that we disconnect from ourselves and from Krishna as well. This is also seen in, and you can see this in the secular world. I was thinking and sharing a personal story. I was thinking of even just when I was a kid. There was 9/11 happened when I was a child, and it was obviously a profound day in New York, around the world. And I remember we had a couple years back, my family had moved to a neighborhood in New Jersey at that time, and we were one of the few families that was Indian, right? That was Desi and brown in our skin color, if you will. And I remember that when this happened, when 9/11 had happened, there was a heightened sense of awareness in the community around people who were different than you. That were different than you. When I was, and when we would play outside, as kids, being 9, 10, 11 years old, playing basketball and different sports. There was actually a group of some of our neighbors in our community. They were afraid of us, and actually they weren't afraid of us in terms of what it looked like on the outside. It looked like they hated us. So every day when they would drive by, and there was these boys, they were like 17, 18, 20 years old, and they were very big, and I'm 10 years old, so it's very scary, but they would yell obscenities and curse words, and they would show all sorts of negative gestures, obscene hand gestures, and curse us off practically 3-4 times a week. And all because we were a different skin color than them, because we weren't who they were, and they felt like we were outsiders. And one time, actually, and my mom is on our call, so she can co-sign this, but one time my parents, we had a devotee at our house, staying at our house, these devotees, and they went for a walk. My parents and the senior devotees went for a walk around the neighborhood. And these same boys, they were intoxicated, they were drunk, and they saw them, and they were driving by in their truck, and they were drinking alcohol and other things, and they just lashed out with cruelty, with violence. For many years it was verbal. It was verbal, abuse, and scaring and bullying. But that day they were intoxicated, and they threw a beer bottle at my parents, and it was a glass bottle, and at this devotee, and it landed next to luckily it missed them. It landed, and then some of the glass went into the devotee's leg, actually. And so I was thinking, growing up with some of these experiences, I was thinking that when I was also a kid, and even now as looking back on, I was thinking, what makes someone cruel and violent to another? We've all either had those thoughts, or we've done something, maybe not that, but we've done something else, potentially. And this is a real experience that personally I had. But I was thinking that actually it's not hatred, but it's actually fear. It's fear of another person, the fear of the other, the fear of the unknown, the fear of someone being different, and what that poses, that brings a sense of hatred or envy even of them. So we have to really look at this. And I want us to reflect in our own mind and heart where this Aghasura-like demon, and Krishna that's saying, sense of insecurity, the internal sense of insecurity is the root cause of projecting it outward. You want to inflict harm on others, just like these individuals want to harm my family and people that look like me because they felt that they saw something on TV or something of the case, and they thought that we were different and that we didn't belong here and that we should be, taken away, if anything, and removed from this country or from this community. Now, we might say that as we reflect on this anartha in our own heart, our propensity for cruelty and violence, we may say, well, we would never do that. We never throw something at someone we don't know for just some very superficial reasons. But it can be more subtle, and I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about some examples of where does this anartha come about. And I thought of some examples because I wanted it to be practical to our life and what we're going through as practicing spiritualists in our Vaishnava communities and trying to grow and improve every day. And so it might not be physical always. We know that we talked about this physical example of him throwing this bottle and harming devotees and all of that. But it also could be a couple of things. One is, and I wrote down 7, 8 examples of where I can see this in my own life or in others and my experiences. But maybe it's this propensity to ignore others that we feel threatened by, we should really reflect on these examples and how we sometimes do these behaviors actually, or maybe we see others and we see this in our community and in ourselves. But this tendency to ignore others that we feel threatened by, or that we don't like. When we don't like someone, maybe it's even a devotee, we can ignore them. Or a tendency to exclude others, right? And I don't mean a healthy level of exclusion where sometimes there's certain conversations that are exclusive or private, but I'm saying to purposely exclude others to harm them, to make them feel hurt. Maybe it's also dismissing, either demoralizing, discouraging others in our community through our actions and our words. Maybe we're comparing ourselves to others, we're criticizing others behind their back. There's another big one. Where we criticize others, we want to tear their character down, and we get this like pleasure out of it, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Sometimes it's also unintentional. It doesn't have to be so apparent, but sometimes maybe it's also taking another form of violence and cruelty can also be taking others for granted in our life, in our community. You know, sometimes we do this, and often I see that sometimes we'll have someone, maybe it's our family or friend, maybe someone's in our community or sangha, and we won't, like, they'll be serving for so many years and giving so much, but there's really like no appreciation for that Vaishnava, you know, and sometimes maybe there's some appreciation here or there, and then sometimes like they leave this world, someone leaves, and then we have this sense of regret that, you know, I should have told them how much they meant to me. I should have appreciated how much they've given to me, and to us and to the community. And I was just actually reading that this, and I was discussing with one of my friends that there was this quote that everything that's said at someone's passing away or their funeral should be said when they're alive, at their birthdays, or even every day, or every week. We can actually appreciate others and let them know that we care and take them, we appreciate them very much, that we don't take them for granted. Because that is also a form of violence, when we take others for granted. Because the lack of acknowledgement, sometimes not even being acknowledged by others, can be as harmful or even more harmful as outright dislike for others. You know, the sense of indifference toward others can be very damaging in our community. So a little piece of homework, let's all give ourselves, maybe even, I'm just suggesting this humbly to all of you and in my life, but maybe this weekend, let's pick 3 people in our life that we appreciate and let them know it very specifically, what we appreciate about them. We don't want to wait till it's too late to do that. And often it becomes too late, and then we have so much regret that I wish, you know, I shared this, I wish I told them how I felt in full, and now they're not here, and it's very difficult for me to actually deal with that. All right, so lack of acknowledgement can be as harmful. Another form of cruelty and violence, subtle, these are all subtle forms, not as gross as like the physical act, but these are all there. Maybe it's not letting others become better than us, right? When others become better than us, maybe it's knowledge, wisdom, maybe it's status in the community, maybe it's wealth and success financially, materially, whatever the case might be. I was reflecting on how there's 3 levels of relationship. There's seniors, there's peers, and there's juniors, right? There's 3 levels of relationship. And with your peers and with your seniors and with your juniors, it's very easy to relate often, right? Those who are junior to you, there's an awe of reverence. You know, you're giving to them, you're mentoring, whatever the case might be. In the seniors, there's awe and reverence, right? Of course, you're learning, you know, you're not competitive so much, so you're learning from them, you're taking shelter. But it's those peers particularly, you know, people who are in the same bracket as you, that you relate to in that way, that sometimes it can be very hard to be happy for their success, especially when their success makes you feel threatened by it. And you feel like, oh, they're passing me up, they're surpassing me. And I've gotta, you know, I actually am praying for their downfall, right? Like almost subtly like praying for others' downfall because we're so threatened by their success, what they're doing, and what does this make me? Does this make me irrelevant? right? Does this make me irrelevant? And so actually the feedback that we're getting in our own life, particularly from this peer level category, is a very valuable feedback for our own spiritual growth. Because usually seniors are very encouraging. They're like, oh yes, you're doing great, right? Keep going. Juniors are in all reverence mode. Please, let me learn from you, generally speaking. But the peers, they know who you are often, right? They've seen you, they know who you were many years back, they know who you are now. They kind of know all your secrets, and so that's the challenge. That's the challenging the group to deal with, actually. But there's a lot we can learn from there. And also juniors that become peers, that's also a challenge too. Because we might have invested in them, and then they become better than us at something. And that can be hard to also take, to be genuinely happy for them, right? That can be very hard to stomach. And then in the same vein, we sometimes purposely wish for others' downfall, right? We're like hoping and praying, and we won't admit it because it's kind of sticky to admit, but we're praying for others' downfall because of the insecurity it brings up within us. So that's also another form of violence and cruelty. And then a couple other ones. Another one is dismissing or deriding others that are not part of our sangha, or our community, or our religion, or our group. Sometimes we see this even in our own community, where others who are not Vaishnavas, who are not practicing bhakti, we can look down on them, like subtly. It's there. I've been guilty of this myself. I'll put my hand up and say that, where sometimes we think that. I see some devotees smiling and putting their hand up as well. But sometimes we think this, right? That, oh, they don't have Krishna consciousness, they're less than. Now, we should help, we should serve, we should give, of course, but we shouldn't do it in a mood of superiority, because that's actually subtly this same anartha, actually is part of this anartha. Thinking that we're better than others, that others who don't have what we have, they're inferior to us. That's very dangerous. Now, we can be grateful for what we have and see the beauty in it. There's nothing wrong with that. But we want to be mindful of that. And then lastly, I was thinking resenting the talents, or when we're resentful of even other Vaishnavas or other people in our community, of the talents, the gifts, the opportunities that they have. We think, why shouldn't we have those things? Instead of trusting what Krishna has given us. So all these examples, I want us to really reflect on our life as we're going through them. How are we playing into these examples? How are we exhibiting these examples in our life, in our interactions, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's peers, whether it's devotee community, whether it's colleagues, whether it's with ourselves. Really thinking about this, noting it down, reflecting on it, and seeing where do we shift that? Where can we shift our behavior? Because all of these examples, they give us a fragile sense of power, right? This like anartha gives us a fragile sense of power. But it's because we have this insecurity within ourselves. But this power is not very powerful. It's not like the spiritual power that we get when we connect to Krishna. It's more this power based off our ego. So again, do this reflection, and I would love to even hear your thoughts when we open up for questions and comments. What are your reflections on this? The other thing I'm thinking of when I thought of Aghasura is also that Aghasura is a snake. And there's a very famous saying, and Srila Prabhupada mentions this also in the 3rd canto. And the snake is very symbolic in the sense that, obviously, it represents many different things. But it's said sometimes in the West, they say the snake will bite the hand that feeds it. Right? The snake will bite the hand that feeds it. You feed a snake, and then it's not grateful. It returns it by biting you, actually. And Srila Prabhupada in the 3rd canto, he mentions that giving a snake milk only increases its venom. Right? It only increases its venom. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 3, 114. And we can think about even our own life, or some examples we see in the world, where when we really lack gratitude, this demon of Aghasura represents a snake. When we lack gratitude, when we feel entitled, right? We feel entitled to this milk. People that have invested in us, that have given to us, are we grateful to them? Or do we take what they've given us, and then look to, betray them, or put them down, or be cruel to them instead, and not be grateful? These feelings of entitlement and insecurity, always looking at the negative, not trusting what we're given. If we look at Kamsa, he's very much got this. this mindset. And obviously he's friends with Aghasura. They like-minded, birds of the same feather flock together, right? But we see Kamsa's example. He actually overthrows his father, Ugrasena, to become the king, and imprisons his father. Because he wants to really kill his father, really, because and you see there's no gratitude for what he's given. There's actually just a selfish, egoistic desire for what he wants, his entitlement. So that's some analysis or just some reflection around Aghasura. And then I want to go a little deeper and make one more point and take us home here, and then I'll open it up for any thoughts. In this verse we're looking at, the first verse, it mentions how as Krishna went into the mouth of Aghasura, that the demigods were concerned. They were concerned. They're saying, alas, alas. And they thought that Krishna might die. Right, as usual, the demigods looking at Krishna. Sometimes they were looking at Krishna like we do, if we're not careful, as just an ordinary boy, and thought he was going to die in this case. But then Kamsa and the other demons, they were very happy. They were ecstatic, right? They were thinking, okay, Krishna, we got him this time. He killed Bakasura, he killed Putana, but this time we have him. And I was thinking that also in relation to we talked about the causes of cruelty and violence, this anartha. We talked about hatred, we talked about envy, and we talked about fear, this insecurity within, right? And feelings of entitlement, all of that, all related. There's also this another feeling that I was reading this book by Brene Brown. Many of you may have heard of her, or maybe some of you have. She's a researcher. She's written some wonderful books around emotions and emotional intelligence. And she recently wrote this book called The Atlas of the Heart, and she catalogs 87 emotions of the human experience. And in this anartha of cruelty, and you're talking about envy, you're talking about taking pleasure in others, kind of downfall. There's this one word that came about that I was reading about from her book, and it's called Schadenfreude. It's called Schadenfreude, and this is this very particular emotion. It's a German word, and it means when we experience pleasure and joy or self-satisfaction that comes from witnessing others' troubles, failures, and humiliation. So it's like this joy or pleasure or satisfaction that comes from witnessing the troubles, failures, and humiliation of others, right? And we can think about in our life where we can see that sometimes. Where going back to these examples, well, sometimes we want others to fail because of the sense of insecurity. And we see Kamsa in this case, he's taking joy at Krishna dying, or potentially dying, right? He's seeing Krishna going in the mouth of Aghasura. And we see he has this emotion 100%, where and all the other demons are jubilant. They're jubilant, saying, okay, Krishna's gonna, the coward boys, this is the day that we defeat them. Right? What's interesting though with this emotion, Schadenfreude, it's a German word meaning the joy that's derived from seeing others harmed or others fail. It's interesting. It's positive. So what researchers have seen is that it's positively correlated with envy, anger, aggression, and narcissism. Right. So this emotion. Because our sense of happiness is somewhat based on others failing. And what's interesting also is that this emotion, Schadenfreude, has a negative relationship with self-esteem or self-worth, right? So the higher our worth is that we feel, and even from a spiritual perspective, the more that we're connected in our relationship with Krishna, the less we feel this emotion actually. But the more we're disconnected, and the less we're connected with Krishna, the more we're going to feel this emotion actually, right? So there's a negative relationship with high self-worth, high self-esteem. Now, there's also, I want to make a note here. There's a difference between feeling this when something bad happens to someone who's doing bad, right? So like, there's a moral feeling of, let's say there's a criminal or someone who's committed some crimes or maybe murders or whatever the case might be. something very heinous, and we see them be held accountable. They go to jail. They're right, all these things are there. They're maybe put on trial, all of that, and we might feel a sense of relief or joy from seeing that there's some fairness in the world. There's some accountability that's occurring for someone's actions. That wouldn't qualify for this. This is where, when we want something bad to happen to people who are actually fundamentally good, right? They're doing actually good, but because of our own insecurity, we want them to fail. And this is actually kind of we all have this feeling, and I don't want to demonize it, because we all have it sometimes that comes up. But it's a form of what I was thinking. Why do we have this? It's actually a form of connection. It's a form of connection to others. And sometimes we have this against even a group. Like we have certain people that we think they're our enemies, right? Let's say it's even like politically, or certain people, certain groups where like, this person's the enemy, and if they're failing, then we're happy because we're like, oh, our enemies are failing, and we'll even connect with others based off this. Right? Sometimes we have like a group think of like our group versus their group. So that group is failing, then our group is succeeding, sort of thing, right? The problem with this is that this is kind of like a demoniac sense of consciousness in some ways, because, and Kamsa has the same consciousness, where it's actually not a real form of connection with others. It's like a counterfeit connection, because we're not actually connected with others. We're connected based off this like selfish agenda of our own success. And you can see Kamsa, his example with the other demons, they don't actually, you can see they don't actually like each other. There's not like an actual real heart-to-heart relationship with all these demons. There's more of a the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Sort of that feeling that like this person is my enemy, and this person, because that's also their enemy, this person is my friend. And so it's all about what they want, their selfish agenda, and who will help them get there. And once they can't help them get there, then they're useless. Or just like Kamsa, he puts Ugrasena in jail immediately and wants to overthrow him because his selfish agenda is to take over. And this feeling of Schadenfreude often comes from this fact that we think that life is a zero-sum game. That if one devotee is, let's say, Krishna Daya Prabhu or Anand Bihar Prabhu is doing well in life, then I can't do well. If they're doing well spiritually, then I can't do well, right? Like, we think that it's a zero-sum game, it's black or white. That others, if they win, that it's not our win. But we can let their win be our win as well. And part of spiritual life, part of dealing with this anartha of Aghasura is developing that consciousness. That's real Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna thinks in this way. And if we're honest, I was thinking this, if we're honest, a lot of our love is very conditional toward other people. It's kind of a hard point to the stomach, but I have to say it. I was thinking about it, that often our love is conditional based off how others make us feel. If they make us feel good, then we love them. But if sometimes they make us feel bad, or like if they're too successful in something and we start feeling insecure around them, then I'm not sure about this relationship anymore. It's conditional. And we start to not be as their well-wishers as much, or root for their success as much. So we talked about many different things, and I want to wrap up here. What's the antidote to this Schadenfreude? It's all about cultivating our Krishna consciousness, our spiritual life, hearing about these pastimes, and then also doing our own inner work, cleaning the mirror of the mind and the mirror of the heart, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in the Shikshashtakam, Jeto Darpana Marjanam. And I was thinking it's important to also cultivate a sense of gratitude, of empathy and joy and compassion for others, for ourselves and for others. Again, going back to this point that whatever we do for ourselves, we end up doing for others. There's the opposite of Schadenfreude is Freudenfreude, which is really interesting, another German word, but it's actually taking joy in the successes of others. Right? We're actually a true well-wisher. And Srila Prabhupada was this true well-wisher. Every letter he would sign, he would say, "You're ever well-wisher." He was always thinking not about what can I gain from my disciples, status, prestige, fame, but he was thinking about how can I give? How can I give to them? How can I love and nourish them? How can I help them get closer to Krishna and develop bhakti within their own heart? He was always an ever well-wisher. That's why he came to New York in 1965 and 66 and starting this movement and this lineage here in the US and around the world, bringing it here, is because of this sense of compassion for others. So we have to practice this. And I want to end with just that at the end of the day, we're all imperfect beings. We have these feelings, we have these thoughts, we have these emotions. We shouldn't beat ourselves up about it, but we can become aware of it, and be curious about it and deal with it with compassion and with empathy. And we can do it with others, our sangha, and support each other. And I was just going to end off with that. If we all do our inner work, our spiritual work with sincerity, with consistency, then eventually we'll be successful. Consistency and sincerity are really important. And also having full faith in Krishna. One thing I really was appreciative in this pastime is that the Gopas, when they're going into the mouth of Aghasura, some of them become a little afraid, as you see in some of the verses earlier. And then actually some of them are excited, but some of them are afraid actually. And then they think to themselves, you know what, Krishna always protects us. Just like he killed Bhakasura, he can kill Aghasura. He can kill this, if this is a demon. And they have full faith. So we should also have faith in Krishna that he'll protect us. And he'll help us deal with these anarthas. So I want to end there and just thank everyone for their attention and their reflection with me. And I talked about a couple points. I'll just recap very briefly, 30 seconds. Aghasura, the snake, the python demon, 8 miles long. He's the brother of Bhakasura, Putana. And we talked about the 3 types of violence that we inflict on ourselves, on others, that others inflict on us, and then on our environment, and then our environment inflicts on within us. The threefold miseries, adhyatmic, adhibautic, adhidevic. We talked about where this comes from a sense of insecurity that brings hatred, malice, envy, right? That fear. And I talked about a story in my own life where seeing the fear of others and that projected outwards of the other, of the unknown. We talked about some examples of where we deal with this, and it can exhibit this emotion. And then reflecting on that and thinking about this idea of Schadenfreude, of willfully wanting and taking joy in other people's failures, and how that's not a Vaishnava-like quality, but truly we should be happy for others. And that means cultivating our own connection to Krishna and our own connection to ourselves, and then to each other through gratitude, through empathy, through compassion, then hearing these pastimes as well. So I want to end with that and open it up for any thoughts and questions. Thank you, everyone. Haribol.
Great class, Anuj Prabhu. Evan Prabhu has his hand raised.
Hare Krishna. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for giving class. I just wanted to share a comment and then I have a question.
Please.
One time I asked my Shiksha Guru, my mentor, Kalakanta Prabhu, I said, is there anything that I can work on? And he actually chastised me for asking that question, because he corrected me in saying that an anartha is not something that we can work on. And that's a common misunderstanding. It's actually not in line with our Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta and the teachings of our acharyas. So my question for you is, what's the line between hearing Bhagavatam? I mean, the process of anartha nivritti it comes about from primarily hearing and chanting and the association of devotees, and not by any endeavor or self-help. So my question is, what's the line between hearing Bhagavatam and chanting and letting Krishna Lila stand in its own right and purify our hearts? The line between that and translating the divine Lila with the mundane mind into a kind of psychological or existential guidance for the human condition.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question, Prabhu. I would say a couple things. One is that we do need to clean the mirror of our mind. And that's my personal perspective. And I think there's a reference of, so I'm not so, maybe there's a little bit of difference there, but I think there's a reference from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Chaitanya Shikshamrita, where he says that in addition to our spiritual practices, there's certain anarthas that we have to work on ourselves as practitioners as well. He says this. So that I don't know. I'm not so sure about that point in terms of that. In terms of like we don't have to do anything because we do, and I take that to heart. I think that the key for me, at least in my life, is that ultimately we connect with Krishna, and Krishna is all purifying, right? Eventually, and us doing that and us connecting in that way is going to purify us. And it's important that we continue to build. I would say even sattva guna to be able to have a good foundation, right? I was giving this example, and this is how I try to practice. But in our lives, the foundation of our lives needs to be sattva, and that starts with our mind, body, and our emotions as well. That's also important. And I was giving this example, and I was hearing from one of our senior devotees around this example actually, that the foundation, it's like if you're shooting an arrow and the target is Krishna, right? And the arrow is us, and the bow is bhakti. It's how we get to Krishna. This one devotee, senior devotee, was giving this example that in this example of this bow, arrow, and this target getting to Krishna, the ground that we're standing on are the gunas, right? So we have like sattva guna, which is some firm foundation. We've got rajaguna, which is like kind of like frozen ice. It looks nice, but it's very slippery. And then we have tamaguna, which is like quicksand, right? It's gonna like drag us down. And so, especially when we're practicing bhakti in the preliminary stages, we have to be mindful of those, that foundation that we have. And anartha nivritti is a big part of that. And then as we move forward, that becomes less and less the goal, right? It becomes less and less the goal, and more of just connecting. So both have to be concurrent. That would be my personal input into your question, and referencing Chaitanya Shikshamrita and that reference there. I think it's important that we do, and Mahaprabhu mentions that we do our own work, but then we also rely on Krishna ultimately. That's the ultimate goal as well. Okay, so that's my personal thought.
I have a follow-up, but we have another comment here.
Okay.
Hi Krishna, thank you for class. Well, I wanted to say, based on, I know Kalakanta Prabhu, and I understand his mood a little bit, and he is often saying this quote that it's act as though everything depends on you, but pray as though everything depends on Krishna.
Exactly.
I also had this question, like, because he's always telling me not to be hard on myself, and I'm like, well, if I'm not hard on myself, how will I advance? But then I had some understanding that we can't get rid of the anartha ourselves. We can't remove the anartha from our own heart. But Krishna, Paramatma, and Krishna, he does everything based on our desire. And so, because I have the question, why do I have to see my anarthas before I can get rid of them? Why do they have to come up before they can come out? And it's because when I don't see them, there's no desire to be free from it. But when I start to see, then I have I start to want it to leave. But the thing is, I have to want to see it also. So we cultivate the desire to be free from these things, but we don't we can't expect any result from that. We just have to pray once we cultivate that desire. So I think that this mood that he was saying, this comment in, was more like the result is not dependent on you. Then the anartha might still remain for some time, and we just have to learn through that. I also have this understanding, this like personal understanding that like if I'm on my deathbed and I'm attached to, oh, I didn't get rid of this anartha and I didn't get rid of this anartha, then I'll have to take birth again so that I can get rid of those anarthas. But if I'm on my deathbed and I'm seeing my anarthas and I say, you know what, Krishna, all of these anarthas are still here, but you have taken care of me, and Prabhupada has taken care of me, and then and I don't have that attachment anymore to being. Yeah. So in that case, it's like
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, thank you. That's actually really well said and way more eloquent than me. So thank you. I appreciate that. And that's what I mean. That ultimately we need to rely on Krishna. We don't need to get, Evan, to your point, we don't have to get too psychological about it. At the same time, having awareness is also important. And we can pray to be also free of these anarthas, right? We can pray to Krishna. But if we don't know what we're working on, then still we can make a lot of progress. It's not that we won't make progress, actually. The path is so powerful, we'll still make progress, actually, automatically. But we can even make some more conscious and some more nuanced progress when we're aware of some of these things as well. And we can pray to Krishna to help us work through some of these that are, especially the ones that are very sticky and are very challenging for us individually. Thank you. Krishna Daya Prabhu, you had a question, by the way?
Thank you,
Or a
Prabhu.
comment?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the wonderful class. So some things in spiritual life, unfortunately, are limited. For example, like the Vapu Seva of Guru Maharaj, so spiritual master. So there are a lot of people, and then so we also have the desire. So in that situation, so that sort of encouraging others, so encouraging juniors or whatever, so then we have a desire also for our own nourishment. So what to do in that case? There are a lot of competition, contention, so but we also want to do, so in that case what to do?
Oh, do you mean like to serve Guru and wanting to serve and then feeling like you have to give up your service for someone else?
Yeah, because or else we have to compete because there are so many people, and then there is limited service. The Vapu Seva, like there are various other services which are expanding, but there are some things which are very, very limited. So.
Yeah. We should try to serve in the mood of giving opportunity to others as much as possible, actually. And that's, I think, a true Vaishnava, as much as possible. We can serve in so many different ways, and we should serve our Guru. And in many cases, sometimes it's not possible to serve physically, right? Whether that person is not here physically in this world or different parts of the world, etc. And if we have some service, that's amazing that we should do to our Guru. But the most important thing is to imbibe the mood of the Guru, the mood of the Guru. And if at all possible, we should try to give that opportunity to others, even, especially if we've been given a lot of opportunity, we should try to give it to others. Now, if we don't have so much opportunity, we try to serve. We should avoid that mood of competition for sure. I would say that can be damaging unless there's kind of like a spiritual competition of like, really coming from this place of like wanting to inspire and motivate each other, right? To like do more service. But that can be a little bit damaging sometimes when we like then subtly again excluding others from certain things and things of that nature, where we're feeling insecure that others are doing something that we're not. We should try our best to include others as much as we can. While yes, we have our service, but actually Krishna is more pleased when we include others, actually. And I was just thinking about some examples, and my wife and I were talking about this the other day, but there's many disciples of Srila Prabhupada who didn't have that much association with Srila Prabhupada directly, actually. And many of them who maybe never even met Srila Prabhupada physically, never spoke to him, but they're still here today. They're still serving very powerfully. And some of them have done some incredible service for Srila Prabhupada and changed, really changed the world or ISKCON or their communities and really added so much benefit. And so it's not always dependent of our spiritual progress to, this is a deeper topic, but it's not always dependent on our spiritual progress to serve the Guru directly, very much so, in that way. Like physically, it's more of imbibing the mood of the Guru and serving the Guru in that way, and the lineage. And we can make great spiritual progress that way. And so you can see that there's many devotees who have never met Srila Prabhupada who are so loyal to Srila Prabhupada and are practicing everything that he mentioned, the essence of it. And then some devotees who spent many years with Srila Prabhupada who are practicing that, or some who have left as well, right? And who are not. So it's not a one-to-one correlation. And so we shouldn't be too attached to that, because sometimes, in all honesty, I was reflecting that we want to serve Guru kind of more for our own validation, for our own, right? Like our own ego sometimes it can be, right? That can actually be the desire of like being seen and recognized and appreciated by Guru, and us feeling that. And yes, that natural desire can be there. But more important is the mood of the Guru. So that'd be my suggestion.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Does that
Beautiful
answer your
discussion.
question, by the way? Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much. It's very helpful. Yeah.
So glad. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhus. Okay, great class. No darshan today, but that's okay. We can put our cameras on and at least reach bhakti. Yes, Yeah, put your camera on. Let's just say hi. Being seen by devotees is, I guess, also very purifying. You know, when Krishna Daya is looking at me, I feel purified. Yeah, Kartik, thank you so much. Gentlemen, very nice seeing you. Okay, Srila Prabhupada included us, so let's include folks around us and please Srila Prabhupada by that. Thank you very much, Anuj, Sharma, Prabhu. Very nice, thoughtful class, helpful, practical, and Shastra-based. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Sunday. Give it to Krishna, and see you again tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Thank you all.
Isabel, Isa.